Welcome back to the Bandwidth Tapes. I'm Brad Williams, and today I'm honored to be joined by percussionist, composer, and author Russell Hartenberger. Russell's work as a performer with Nexus, his longtime collaboration with Steve Reich, and his writing on performance practice have shaped generations of percussionists. In this conversation, we talk about studying with Alan Abel and Fred Hinger, the importance of sound and timpani technique, military band life during the Vietnam era, and the formative years of Nexus and Reich's ensemble. We also explore Russell's composition, Requiem for Percussion and Voices, and the experiences that inspired it. This is a reflective, wide-ranging conversation about sound, history, and legacy. Here's my conversation with Russell Hartenberger. Russell, it is a pleasure to welcome you to the podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm been so excited to talk with you. It is such an honor to sit and talk with you today. I can't begin to put into words the impact that your writing and your performing and your composing has been to me. So thank you in advance for all of the gushing that I'm going to do for the next few minutes. I think the first time I heard you play, I was thinking back on it. I was a high school student and just happened to be listening to college radio one Sunday night, and some ambitious college student played back-to-back Concerto for Orchestra by Elliott Carter, and then The Desert Music by Steve Reich.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it just led me on a path, a possible obsession with Steve's music, which then led me to Nexus, which then led me to you. So, so thank you for all of that.
So Desert Music was your first experience with Reich's music?
It was.
Wow.
Yeah, it was quite a drinking from the fire hydrant moment as a music listener. Yeah, and I was probably, 14, 15 years old when I heard it. Uh-huh. And then fast forward, I'm a college student. I studied percussion at Belmont University in Nashville, and was lucky enough to do some concerts at the time with Christopher Norton while he was still at Western Kentucky.
Yeah.
And then a friend of mine drove up to Bowling Green when Nexus was performing at Western Kentucky. This would have probably been in like 98, possibly, I want to say. Uh-huh. And you did a performance there. And I just remember that night in particular because you all performed One Last Bar, Then Joke and Sing.
Oh, yeah.
What an unbelievable piece of music.
Yeah, that's a beauty.
So yeah, that's my Russell Hartenberger origin story, if you will. So I'd love to just to talk a little bit about how it all started for you, because I know you grew up in Oklahoma, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and what led you into the world of percussion, other than Alan Abel?
Well, it was basically Alan Abel. I joined my school band in sixth grade, and when I decided to play snare drum, the local music store brought instruments to our band room, and the band director said we could go pick an instrument. And I was looking around at various things, and my good buddy Randy Colors said there's this thing called a snare drum, which I had actually never heard of. And so we went over and looked at them, and the manager of the music store said, if you pick this one, all you're going to have to buy is a practice pad and a pair of drumsticks. So that made my parents very happy.
Yeah.
So we picked that and started playing in our grade school band. And our band director, who was actually a graduate of Eastman, he was a trombone player and a very special man in my life, recommended that we take drum lessons. And it just so happened that Alan Abel was the percussionist in the Oklahoma City Symphony and was teaching young students. So I arranged to take lessons with him, and kind of the rest is history. He's such a great teacher, and especially for somebody. I was 11 at the time, so just to begin with him at that age was serendipitous, to say the least.
Yeah. We were talking about teachers before we started recording, and my son and I were both lucky to study with Jack Bell, and I remember one of the first things that Jack really focused on was developing your sound on the instrument. Was that similar with Alan, or did you kind of jump in on technique, or what was his primary focus with his young students?
Well, at that age, he was mainly getting mechanics. So he played everything together with me. We'd stand side by side with our practice pads, and he played everything, all the rudiments, exercises, pieces for the whole 30-minute lesson. So I was able to watch and feel. I guess in a sense I was duplicating his sound, but at that point it was mainly mechanics.
Yeah,
getting that together. And the same thing happened when we started marimba. He played everything up an octave, and he actually had this small, I guess it was about a 2-octave marimba that he had bought at a lawn sale somewhere. And he bought it for $10, and every beginning mallet student he had would buy it for $10 from another student. The rule was you couldn't sell it for any more than $10. So everybody, you'd learn on it for a while until you got a regular marimba, then you sold it to the next guy for $10. So that was my first instrument until I got a Deegan Imperial 4-octave marimba for $250.
Wow. When did Alan move to Philadelphia? And I know you went to Curtis, so how does that timeline work with him moving and then you going to Curtis?
Yeah, I was about 14, so I studied with him for about 3 years. So can't remember what year that would be. Late 50s, I guess. He got the job as percussionist in the Philadelphia Orchestra, so he moved away, and his replacement in the symphony was Tom Gager.
Wow. Yeah.
So I studied with Tom for a little bit. Then he went to the Boston Symphony, and for the last year or two of my high school, I studied with a woman named Kadeen Walker. Kadeen was a student of Mr. Abel's also. She was about 7 years older than me, but a really fine player. So I studied with her. She helped me prepare my audition for Curtis. I didn't know anything about Curtis until Mr. Abel told me about the school and about Dan Hinger. So I auditioned for Curtis, and again, my parents were happy when they found out it was tuition free.
Yeah. What it was? It's amazing how the Oklahoma Symphony attracting these incredible percussionists like the three that you've mentioned. It's quite amazing.
Well, it's even beyond that. A year or so after I left, John Wire got the timpani position in the Oklahoma City Symphony. He was there for a year. So John Wire went through there, and there are several other people for some reason. It's one of those, I guess, starter symphonies for percussionists that later went on to bigger jobs.
Yeah. So tell me about studying at Curtis with Mr. Hinger.
Mm-hmm. I'll start with my audition for Curtis. I played all my prepared pieces, a snare drum piece, a marimba piece, and a timpani solo. And then Mr. Hinger said, he handed me a timpani mallet and said, "Here, make the biggest sound you can." And so I had no idea what he was talking about, so I made the loudest sound I could. And he said, "Try again and try to make it bigger, not louder." Of course, I couldn't do that. Then he took the mallet out of my hand and made this unbelievably beautiful, round, full sound. And basically, I spent the next 4 years trying to imitate that sound. He was very concerned with sound. And of course, he taught everything, but mainly timpani. The most valuable information I got from him was playing timpani.
I think I've talked about this a lot on this podcast about the importance of studying with a good timpanist or just studying timpani in general. For me, I feel like it's the instrument that informs so many of the other percussion instruments in terms of tone production and sound, that if you can develop a good timpani tone, it's going to translate so well to all the other instruments.
Yeah, that's true. That's how I've always taught my students. If you to develop a good sound on marimba, for example, you need to work on your sound on timpani. I think it's because it's a large instrument and it takes large arm motions.
Yeah.
And you start learning about weight and touch. So when I work with students on marimba, I relate a lot of the information through timpani. And kind of interesting, I've talked to Bob Becker, my colleague in Nexus, about that. And he said he has a similar relationship between snare drum and xylophone. He said to really develop technique on xylophone, you need to work through snare drum. And I think that's because of the control of hands. I don't know if you've probably seen Bob play xylophone.
Oh, yeah.
People listening to this podcast, they should definitely watch some of the videos. So he plays with his hands very low to the keyboard. He moves laterally without lifting his hands, yet he's able to get a very big sound, even on xylophone. So presumably that sort of technique begins with control of snare drum. And another thing with Hinger is he used to have us play our marimba pieces on xylophone. You had to work harder to get a kind of big sound on xylophone. So
that's interesting.
So we would occasionally, he would have us play. We'd come in for our lesson and prepared a marimba piece, and he would have us do it on xylophone.
Yeah. So when you went to Curtis, was your plan, your career path, I guess, to be an orchestral percussionist, or what were you wanting to do as a performer at that point?
yeah, that was what most young percussionists aspired to at that time. That was kind of the only thing available.
Yeah.
And of course, my teachers were all orchestral percussionists. So that was the career path that most of us wanted, and I was the same way. Wanted to have a job in an orchestra. So, studied all the excerpts with Hinger, especially. I was kind of young to get into the excerpts with Mr. Abel, but with Hinger, he mainly taught timpani through excerpts. I don't recall any kind of. He would give me technical exercises, mostly having to do with sound, but any musical training was through orchestral excerpts.
Yeah, that's interesting. I heard in another interview with you that you did a military band because I think you were going to be drafted. I mean, that's probably what would have happened, right? Had you
Oh yeah,
not done that.
yeah. That was I graduated from Curtis in 1966, so that was at the height of Vietnam War, and they were just beginning to draft people at the time, and the only I think there were some ways you could get out of it. I think maybe some grad students, if you were in graduate school, maybe you could, or if you were married with kids or something, you could avoid the draft. But it was a draft lottery, and it was based on your birthday. So before the lottery actually happened, I was wondering about what to do about that. So I auditioned for an orchestra in December. I guess it would have been 61. My senior year at Curtis, I auditioned for an orchestra called the Chamber Symphony of Philadelphia, which was an orchestra that was just being formed. And the conductor was Anshel Brusiloff, who had been the concertmaster of the Philadelphia Orchestra, but was embarking on a conducting career. So he formed this chamber orchestra in Philadelphia, and so I auditioned for that job just to get audition experience with no really thought of getting the job because I was still basically in school. And then it was in early December of that year that I auditioned. And right after that, I went home to Oklahoma for Christmas. And I came back in January to my apartment and the phone started ringing. And it was the personnel manager for the Chamber Symphony. And he said, been trying to reach you all this time. We want to offer you the job. And I was stunned.
Yeah.
So he said, come to my office and sign the contract. So I walked over to his office in Philadelphia, and there was a contract, and it was for, I think, $200 a week, which was a huge amount of money for me at the time. And so he handed me a pen and said, sign here. And just before I signed my name, he said, oh, wait a minute, I need to call the draft board and see if there's any chance that you would be drafted out of the orchestra. So he literally pulled the pen out of my hand as I was about to sign. And he called the draft board. And of course they said, oh, absolutely. He'll definitely be drafted out of, the orchestra or whatever job. So they withdrew the offer of my, contract with the Chamber Symphony. So just before that, on my way home to Oklahoma from Philadelphia, I had stopped in Washington, D.C. at the time and auditioned for service bands. I auditioned for the Marines and the Navy and the Air Force. And when I couldn't take the job at the Chamber Symphony, I called the Air Force band and they said there was an opening and they would offer me a position. So I accepted that position. And then, so in May, when I graduated from Curtis, I went right into basic training with the Air Force and joined the Air Force band.
Wow.
Stationed in Washington, D.C.
I mean, talking about your life taking a hard left turn in a matter of seconds from about to sign that contract
Yeah.
to then be doing that. I mean, who knows where your life would be right now had that gone in a different direction?
Yeah, it's interesting. I have no idea. The person who actually got that job was Jack Moore. I don't know if you probably haven't heard of Jack Moore. He was a pianist. He studied with Cloyd Duff, really wonderful musician. And he had it. I think the orchestra only lasted a few years, and then it folded probably from financial problems. So I don't know what would happen, but yeah, it's not something I envisioned or even wanted at the time.
Sure.
But it turned out to be a good thing.
Looking back on that experience of playing in the military band, what do you think you took away from that time in your life as a performer and just as a person?
Well, that was sort of a pivotal time in United States history.
Sure.
Vietnam and all the protests, Kennedy assassination, RFK, Martin Luther King Jr., all those things were going on. There was drug revolution, Woodstock, all these things, rock and roll, Beatles, all that was happening around that time. So it was general turmoil in a lot of people's lives. So in a sense, it was probably good that I had the regulation of that kind of job. And at the time, there were, I don't know, a certain percentage of the band members who were lifetime. They were in it for a lifetime job, 20 to 30 years. And they told us younger guys that job was not that much different from an orchestra job. And at the time, we kind of scoffed at them and thought, well, that's crazy. But looking back on it, they were really right. We were getting paid pretty well. In those bands, you're promoted to E6 pretty quickly, which is a pretty substantial salary boost. And you weren't allowed to live on base, and you were given a housing allowance to get your apartment. But you could still use all the facilities of the base, the PX and so forth. So there were a lot of benefits to it. You had to rehearse every morning, just as you would in an orchestra, and concerts 2 or 3 times a week. Traveling, we traveled 2 months out of the year. So it wasn't that much different. We had to wear uniforms, just like an orchestra you sort of do. You had to obey the conductor. So in a way, it was really similar. We had a lot of free time. And so I took advantage of the free time to get a master's degree at Catholic University in Washington. And that also turned out to be a really important step. The dean of the music department at Catholic was very sympathetic to the situation of the guys in the service bands. He knew that we could be called to, if there's a funeral or something came up, we could be called to duty within a few hours or a day, and we might have to miss a class or a rehearsal or even an exam. So he was very sympathetic to that and made allowances for that sort of thing. So a lot of guys at the time were getting their master's degree at Catholic. So I could also use the GI Bill to help finance that. So I didn't have to pay very much to get my master's. And I could do it part-time. I would take 1 or 2 courses per semester, whatever I felt I had time for. And then one of the courses I took was contemporary music history class. And the teacher of the class was a pianist named Emerson Myers, who actually I ended up playing the Bartok Sonata with him.
Oh, wow.
Another pianist, and Bob Becker. Bob Becker was in the Marine Band at the time, so we played it with him. But anyway, at one of his classes, he happened to mention the term ethnomusicology. I had never heard that word before, and he said it had to do with music from different cultures. At the time, a lot of recordings were starting to become available of non-Western music. So there is, of course, the use of Indian music in the Beatles recordings. There was Olatunji Drums of Passion, There was a monkey chant from Balinese gamelan. So all these things were sort of in the ether. And I was becoming interested because they all had a lot of percussion in them. And also I was kind of disenchanted with being in the band. Even though I realized it was a good experience, I didn't particularly want to be there. Anybody outside the band was letting their hair grow long and and doing whatever they wanted to do, and I was kind of trapped in this military situation. So I was looking for other things in life, and so I started looking into ethnomusicology, and I found 3 degree programs in the United States that had ethnomusicology programs. One was the University of Washington, one was Indiana University, and the third was Wesleyan University. So I looked into them, and Wesleyan looked like the best choice for me because it emphasized performance. You could take lessons and classes in different kinds of music. So I interviewed for Wesleyan and was accepted into the PhD program. They called it world music, not ethnomusicology, but basically the same thing. So after I left Curtis, I went to grad school at Wesleyan, where I started my adventures with non-Western music.
Wow. So how long was your time in the military band? How long did you do that? Was it like a 2-year?
No, it was almost 4 years.
Almost 4 years. Okay. Wow.
A few months short. They were, by the time my 4 years was nearly up, they were letting people out a little bit early. They were trying to downsize to save some money. So I got out maybe 3 months shy of 4 years. But yeah, for the Navy, Marines, and Air Force, it was 4 years. For the Army, it was 3. Steve Gadd was in the Army band the same time I was in the Air Force band.
Wow. So you, Steve Gadd, and Bob Becker were all in military bands at the same time. Is that right?
Yeah, we were.
And all in the 3, right?
Yeah.
Army, Navy, Marines.
And yeah, Bob was in the Marines. I was in the Air Force, and Steve was in the Army band. Yeah,
the Army band. Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Tell me about the year 1971. I know that's a big year for you in terms of Nexus, and is that when you met Steve as well? Did all of that happen in the span of 1971?
Yeah, 1971. So I started Wesleyan at the 1970-71 school year. So September of 1970, I started Wesleyan, and Bob came to Wesleyan a year later, so he wasn't there that year. So I started studying African drumming, tabla, murdungum, and gamelan at Wesleyan. And I became very interested in particular with African drumming. I had a great teacher, Abraham Adzenya from Ghana. And he didn't really tell me anything about going to Africa, but I was interested in going there to hear what the music was like in its natural environment. So I started talking to some friends about this, and I said, I want to go to Ghana, but I don't know how to do it. At that time, there were no programs of students going there like there are now. It was kind of an unusual thing to do. And I happened to mention to a fellow grad student named Richard Teitelbaum. Now, Richard was a composer, although he was getting his PhD in world music too. And he was from New York City. And he said, well, I happen to have a friend in New York City who is a composer and who went to Ghana in the summer of 1970. And he's he came back from Ghana and he's writing a piece for percussionists, but he doesn't know any percussionists. So why don't I try to get you two together? And he can tell you about his experiences in Ghana, and maybe he'll invite you to hear a rehearsal of his. So that was Steve Reich. So Richard Teitelbaum introduced Steve Reich and me. I went to New York City and met Steve, and he was telling me about what he did in Ghana, where he stayed, and what kind of inoculations he got, and all those kinds of important pieces of information. A couple of contacts to look up, and he said, "Why don't you come to my loft in the Soho area of Manhattan? I'm working on this piece for percussion. Right now, it's being played by non-percussionists, so you might be interested." So I went to a rehearsal. At that point, he was working on the bongo section of drumming. And the performers were Steve, who had some percussion training. He studied with Roland Koloff, actually, when he was a teenager. And the other players were Arthur Murphy, who was a jazz pianist, Steve Chambers, a classical pianist, and John Gibson, who was a woodwind player. And they were playing the bongo section of drumming. So I found it. I was intrigued by the whole thing. So Steve said, "Why don't you come to the rehearsal?" So at that point, he was kind of finishing up the bongo section and just beginning the marimba section of drumming. And so I started coming to rehearsals, and he taught it. The interesting thing, he was teaching drumming just like I was learning African drumming and my other non-Western percussion lessons. So it was all by rote. Steve was writing the piece, and he was teaching it to us as he was writing it. So we would come in for a rehearsal, and he would demonstrate. He could play, of course, all the parts. So he would demonstrate what he had written during the week, and we would repeat it until we got it and tack it on to what we learned the week before. And gradually, over the period of several months, learned the piece by memory, of course, which is the best way to do it. Still, when I teach drumming, I find that's the best way. I tell the students, don't bother looking at the score. You'll learn faster by rote. Yeah. So anyway, that I started coming to rehearsals in early 1971. And then I got a call from Bob Becker, who was, I think at that time at Eastman, working on a master's. He got out of the Marines early on a medical discharge, and started working on his master's at Eastman. And he had gotten together with Bill Kahn, and they had started playing improvisation concerts in coffee shops around the Rochester area. And Robin Engelman was in the Rochester Philharmonic at the time, and I can't remember. John was somewhere around there. Anyway, Bob Becker and Bill Kahn were both studying with Warren Benson, who was a percussionist, but was teaching composition at Eastman at the time, and introducing them to a lot of world music. And by that time, Bob and Bill and John and Robin had gotten together and just improvised on various instruments. Like John Wire was kind of the one who began instrument collection from around the world. And so he had these instruments, and all the rest of us eventually started collecting instruments too. So we had quite a large variety of instruments, gongs and bells and drums from other cultures that we had no idea how to play. So we were all putting them together and just improvising. So Warren Benson suggested that we all bring them together at Kilburn Hall in Eastman and play an actual concert. So I couldn't be there. Actually, the night of the concert, I was on my way to Ghana, so I couldn't play. But John and Robin and Bob and Bill played the first Nexus concert in May of 1971. Just a totally free improvisation concert. And that was kind of the beginning of Nexus. So it all happened around the same time.
Wow.
This thing, Steve Reich non-Western music, Nexus, all happened sort of around 1971. So it was really a pivotal time in all our lives, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, that's incredible. How it all just, the timeline, just how it all lines up.
Yeah.
When you started playing with Steve's ensemble, first of all, how did drumming feel when you started playing that with those non-percussionists playing those parts? Did they have a different interpretation, or did you think they felt the beat differently maybe than you did? And was there some negotiation on some of that with all of you, or what were those early days like rehearsing that piece?
Well, they didn't play like percussionists play. They didn't play with sort of strict rhythmic feel like we're taught to do. But neither did Steve. And when Steve demonstrated the parts, he didn't play that way, even though he had the most actual percussion technique of anybody. He played with a kind of not exactly a jazz feel, but semi-swing feel. His big influence, of course, was Kenny Clark.
Yeah.
Bebop drummer. He talks about that a lot, going to Birdland and hearing him play and having that feeling of magic time, which he called it, the sort of floating time that Kenny Clark had. And so he kind of envisioned that. And that combined with the fact that he didn't have a lot of percussion technique gave the feeling sort of a semi-swing feel. I hate to use the word swing because it wasn't really that, but it wasn't strict, a square percussion time that we would probably try to play if we were doing like an orchestral excerpt or something, or a Wilcoxon solo. So the fact that the piano player and players and the woodwind player didn't have control either. So it sort of fit in a way. All the four of them playing together fit in a certain way. And especially the Arthur Murphy, who did most of the phasing in the first part of drumming. He was a tremendous musician. He was a fan of Bill Evans and actually transcribed a lot of Bill Evans solos. I think he knew Bill and worked with him. So he was a great jazz player. He had a really creative way to do the phasing. So I think my first kind of insight into how to phase was mostly with Arthur Murphy and the way he did it and the way he tried to extend phases as long as he could. It's sort of a virtuosic approach to phasing. Pretty soon after I started playing with the group, Jim Price joined the group. And Jim, of course, played very similarly to the way I did. Jim went to Eastman and sort of had a similar background studying with, he studied with William Street, but he also was influenced greatly by Hinger. He studied privately with Hinger. And so we had pretty much the same concept of sound. And then, sometime later, Bob came in. And so when Bob and Jim and I kind of took over, then we started playing drumming with more of a percussionist approach, but still with a little bit of Steve's magic time feel, that the Kenny Clark swing feel that he had.
Yeah.
And I think that really established the sound of the Reich Ensemble. And when other musicians came into the group, as he started expanding his compositional output, started doing music for Mallets and music for 18 and sextet and desert music and all those pieces. The other musicians, the non-percussionists, really tried to play time anyway, the same way the percussionists did. So it's probably the first time that percussionists really were the centerpiece of the ensemble in terms of interpretation.
Yeah, absolutely. During those early years, in speaking, compositionally, was it Was there a collaborative element to that, or was Steve pretty strict on this is what we're going to play, or did he solicit feedback from the ensemble about maybe we should try this here, or what was that like?
He was always open to ideas. He wasn't dogmatic in that sense. I mean, he wrote the licks and the pieces, so that was there. But for example, in drumming, there's resultant patterns, and he allowed the performers to come up with resultant patterns. He had some ideas, but the performers could come up with those ideas. Even with the singers, I think he worked separately with the singers, and they would sit and listen to the mallet part of the marimba part of drumming, and just all come up with ideas about resultant patterns. And then when we got to pieces like Music for 18 Musicians, that was a little trickier because it was there was a lot of collaborative cueing and choreography around who's going to go where and do what. And Steve was very open to input from the musicians about what worked well and what we could do and who they needed to be looking at, and was very open to ideas. So even though he had specific ideas about the compositional content, he was very open to suggestions from musicians.
Yeah. Do you feel that playing in that ensemble really informed a lot of the approach to Nexus? Did you, in terms of compositions, just the way you ran your ensemble down to rehearsals and performances, how much do you feel like you all working with Steve informed your own ensemble?
Well, Nexus approached things quite differently. We were, as I mentioned, an improvisation ensemble to begin with. Mm-hmm. And Steve was, in a sense, against improvisation per se, although I have improvised with him and he really enjoyed it. But he didn't want that in his pieces. So kind of the beginning of Nexus was quite a bit different than the beginning of Reich Ensemble. I guess you know that Nexus was originally 6 people. There was a guy named Michael Craden who was in the group, and he couldn't read music. He was a visual artist from California, and he was kind of a disciple of Emil Richards. I don't know if you know Emil, the great.
Oh yes, absolutely.
The great studio percussionist and jazz player from LA. So when we started playing with Nexus, of course, Michael was fine with that because we were all improvising. And even when we started playing the rags, Michael improvised the percussion parts on his percussion table. But then eventually Nexus started bringing in composed pieces, and one of the first, of course, was drumming, first part of drumming. So Reich's music was really, Reich and Cage, I guess, Third Construction, they were kind of the first composed pieces that we started doing. So I don't think the style of Reich's approach to drumming in terms of preparing it, I think that was quite different than the rest of what Nexus was doing. Although the important thing was that we started playing Reich's music and incorporating his music into our regular concerts. So I think that's probably one of the reasons the percussion community became that familiar with Reich's music is through Nexus concerts.
Absolutely. No, I agree with that. Yeah. I remember hearing recordings of you all early on in my, experience listening to Steve's music. And yeah, I always, and I think there's so many, I recently had Peter Martin from Third Coast Percussion on the podcast,
Yeah,
and we talked about Steve's music, and because they won a Grammy with
right.
recording, and I do think this, next generation of performers are, they're playing that music. But in my book, you all kind of laid out the blueprint you set the foundation on which all of these other ensembles and performers to this day are understanding how to interpret that music and how to approach it. I think Nexus and that ensemble with Steve is, to me, is kind of the standard on which everything else has been based.
Yeah, well, it's kind of interesting how the interpretation of Steve's music has evolved. So Peter Martin, I'd be interested. I should go listen to that podcast you did with
Mm-hmm.
Peter. I'm kind of interested in how these other groups were introduced to Reich's music and how they use it. For example, So Percussion plays music for pieces of wood on actual pieces of wood instead of claves and different things like that. I know Third Coast has played drumming with Hubbard Street Dance Company, and I'm sure they've had to figure out ways to interpret the piece to combine it with dance. So I'm kind of interested in how all these people came to incorporate Reich's music into their ensembles. I think you're right. A lot of people early on were from the Reich recordings and Nexus recordings, but then they kind of made it their own and developed in certain ways.
Before we go today, I did want to take a little bit of time and talk with you about Requiem for Percussion and Voices, one of my absolute favorite pieces of music
Thanks.
for percussion or anything. I just think it's just an incredible work, and I'd love to just hear a little bit about the genesis of that and what motivated you to write it and what that process was like.
Well, I don't know. Maybe some of it's because I'm old. A certain age, you start thinking about your mortality. But, it occurred to me that a lot of drumming, like the drumming that we do, has to do with funeral situations. For me in particular, I played a lot of funerals when I was in the Air Force Band at the Arlington Cemetery. And even though I didn't always want to be doing it or enjoy it, it never failed to have an impact on me. Every funeral was emotionally impactful
Sure.
to go through the process, especially under the circumstances of Vietnam and so forth. And I just started thinking about, there's the Kennedy funeral which was a huge event in U.S. political history. And one of the drummers that I worked with in the Air Force Band was one of the drummers that played in his funeral. So they picked one percussionist or one drummer from each of the service bands to play, and Harold Ludwig was his name, and he played. He was the Air Force representative, and we had a sort of a street beat. We played "Marching to the Cemetery in Arlington," and it was the same one that they used in the Kennedy funeral.
Wow.
So that was kind of implanted in my mind. And then I started thinking about other things, and then there was the March to the Scaffold in Berlioz' Symphonie Fantastique. And so I sort of took that as a theme throughout the piece. So then I guess I related it to my life. One of the movements has to do with this church bell I grew up in a small town in Oklahoma, and there was my family went to a small Presbyterian church, but they had a bell tower. They had a bell in a tower, and my father was an elder in the church, and his job was to ring the bell for morning services to let people know it was about to begin. And he let me help him, and he would hold me up, and I would hang on to the rope, and then it would pull me down, and the bell would ring, and then the weight of the bell would bring me back up. So I would be moved up and down by the tolling of this bell. And sort of tolling bell is another one of those percussion motifs that happens in a lot of ways. So these various things just kind of came at me thematically, gave me ideas for writing the piece.
Yeah. Was it a conscious decision, or to add the voices to it? Was any of that a nod to your time with Steve's ensemble, or was it a completely separate thing to make that choice?
I'm not so sure it was a nod to Steve. Maybe it was. I hadn't thought about it exactly that way. I guess it could have been. I just thought it would add a important element to the piece to have.
It certainly did. Yeah. Yeah. Incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How did you map? Because I know it doesn't specifically follow like the Latin Requiem structure, right?
Mm-hmm.
How did you map kind of the architecture of that piece?
Well, I didn't think about that at the beginning. I just started writing the pieces, and then once I had, several of them written, it seemed to kind of fall into place. It was obvious what to begin with and what to end with, and then felt good to have sort of a drum cadence movement near the beginning. I don't know, just once I had the pieces more or less written, then the overall structure fell into place. I didn't think about that beforehand.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a powerful piece of music. I encourage everyone listening to this to go and find it and listen to it. It's had quite an impact on me as a performer, as a listener. Just it's a wonderful piece of music. So thank you for that, Russell.
Yeah, an interesting thing that I've learned in writing it is, when I recorded it, of course, we recorded all the instrumental parts first, and the vocal parts were overdubs. And I had only two singers, a male and a female singer, and they overdubbed all the parts, all the female and male parts. And that was sort of a act of convenience more than anything else. But we did it at the University of Toronto just last year. Ayun Huang programmed it. And we had 3 females and 2 males singing, and it's so much better with several voices singing at once.
Yeah.
Really, really makes it much fuller. And I like it better that way.
Yeah. You mentioned the University of Toronto. What is your what is your schedule these days? Are you doing a lot of teaching? Are you performing any? What are you up to
Well, I
these
retired
days?
from teaching, I don't know,
Hmm.
10 years or so ago, and IU
Yeah.
is now there and is really transforming the program and making it up to date. You can get a double degree in percussion and music technology.
Wow.
These days, a lot of percussionists are interested in that. And of course, she does a lot of percussion theater too. So she's up to date on a lot of things that young percussionists are interested in these days. So it's a great program. So I go in from time to time. She wants me to coach a piece or work with students on a thing now and then. So I don't really do any teaching. I do go to other universities and do residencies. I was at Northern Illinois and Ohio State, and just was at Eastman earlier this fall. We did drumming there. I do different things like that, but I don't really do any teaching. And mostly, I'm as far as writing goes, I'm not composing as much as I am writing articles.
Yeah.
That seems to be the thing that comes my way, and I really enjoy writing. So just finished an article. I don't know if you know Lisa Rogers and Kathleen Kastner, but they're putting together a handbook of percussion pedagogy that's being published by Oxford University Press. So they asked me to write an article, so I just finished that. And there's another book coming out on, it's, I think maybe you're familiar with the Cambridge Companion to Percussion that I did.
Absolutely.
So a guy in England is working on one, the Cambridge Companion to Steve Reich. So he's asked me to write an article on performing. So that's, I think that article is going to be about the sort of a transformation of the way percussionists have interpreted Reich's music from the early days when we were doing it with Nexus guys, to Colin Curry and people like that who are really taking charge of it and making it their own.
Yeah.
I think that's what that article will be about. So those kinds of articles I'm writing these days.
Yeah. I'm actually, funny enough, I'm interviewing Colin in a few weeks, and I'm certain that we'll be talking about you, and we'll be talking about Steve's music. So, yeah. And it's, speaking of your writing, before we go, I'm such a fan of the book, the performance practice and the music of Steve Reich. It's such a, just like a survival handbook, I suppose, of playing that music and just understanding how to approach it and how to just get inside that music and as a player. Yeah, it's wonderful. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Russell, it's been an honor and just a pleasure getting to chat with you, and just thank you for the legacy that you've established for other performers and the mark you've left on the percussion community and the musical community at large. So thank you so much, and I wish you all the best.
Thanks, Brad. Great talking with you.
That was my conversation with Russell Hartenberger. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow or subscribe to the Bandwidth Tapes wherever you listen, and consider leaving a rating or review. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.